I'm not saying there won't be a little pain, but the market's gone up 40%, 42%, so we might lose a little bit of it. But we're going to have a much stronger country when we're finished.
China says it didn't start this, but we'll see it through.
We've noticed a related statement by the United States. China has made its position very clear on the China-U.S. trade issue. We don't want to trade war, but we are not afraid of such a war.
Andrew Stevens joins me now from Hong Kong. Hey, Andrew, I want to look at what the numbers are. The Dow is down nearly 400 points. No pain, no gain. It feels like there's a little bit of pain going on.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, the Dow only about an hour or so ago was down around about 100 points, so something's kicked it off again. And Larry Kudlow, the chief economic advisor, the new chief economic advisor to Donald Trump, is trying to hose down these suggestions or these clear pointers of a trade war, Robin, by saying this is still just a proposal and there is still room to talk on this. But as you point out, the Chinese are not blinking on this. Donald Trump is obviously not blinking. There was a press conference at the Commerce Department just a couple of hours ago, which is a pretty rare move to have a press conference on a Friday. Evening or any evening for that matter, and the Chinese say they are fully prepared. They have some very the quote is detailed countermeasures to put into place against this latest move by the US. Now, what we know at the moment is Donald Trump has asked his trade representative to look at slapping tariffs on another $100 billion worth of Chinese exports to the United States, and that's in response to the tariffs on $50 billion worth of US exports to China that the Chinese slapped on just a couple of days ago. Donald Trump called that very unfair and harmful to the agricultural industry in the US, and that's why he has announced this new round. And the Chinese are gearing up, apparently, to make an announcement on what they intend to do. And certainly at this stage, Robin, it would be $1 billion of tariffs because the US doesn't export that amount of goods to China, but they could do things like target some of the big US companies like Apple, like Starbucks operating in China, and really, sort of do damage on that front.
Literally, it looks like a game of chicken. There we go. Trade chicken. Who's going to blink?
It does. I mean, it's what an extraordinary week if you look at that. But the interesting thing about this is that you've got two very entrenched positions. Both sides are saying they're prepared to talk. The Chinese have been insistent that the only way to deal with this is to talk about it, to negotiate. They've actually taken the United States down to the World Trade Organization. Donald Trump is still saying, there's daylight here to talk, but Trump and the administration believes that the Chinese have been using underhand illegal measures to get hold of technology through technology transfer or just cyber theft, and the Chinese say that we have a plan that's called Made in China 2025. A lot of that high-tech stuff that the US is now targeting is the key to that 2025 plan. So the Chinese aren't going to back away from sort of preparing themselves for the next decades.
Okay, keeping an eye on all of that. Thanks so much, Andrew Stevenson. So now to a very dramatic fall from grace. Former South Korean President Park Geun-hye has been sentenced to 24 years in prison. The court convicted her on charges of abuse of power, bribery and coercion. Park was removed from office last year after accusations that she and a long-time friend received bribes from businesses. Park was not in court for the sentence and she is expected to appeal. To India now, where one of the country's richest men and a Bollywood superstar, Salman Khan, will have to stay in jail at least one more night. This weekend, the actor finds out if he can be released on bail while he appeals his sentence for poaching. Here's a report from New Delhi.
Another night in jail for one of India's most famous actors, Salman Khan. It may seem surprising in a country that is so starstruck, but a prison official says this celebrity's not getting VIP treatment, sleeping on the floor and eating the same basic food as other prisoners. Khan's been sentenced to serve 5 years in prison after being convicted of illegal poaching in a decades-old case. He's long maintained his innocence. His lawyers hope he'll be released on bail, and following that can begin an appeal. In a country where there are plenty of superstars, Khan is seen as one of the top. His movies, his love life, his comments, his fashion, his physique, all are fodder for fans and critics alike. He's also huge business. Analysts are estimating with 3 movies in the pipeline, any prison time could cause millions of dollars in losses. This particular case has run on for nearly 20 years, a long time even for India, where cases often take many years. But Khan, like many super rich, has an army of lawyers who are able to challenge the case at every step. The superstar was also tried in a 2002 hit-and-run case in Mumbai. This went on for 15 years until he was acquitted. Fans gathered outside the courthouse holding posters of the superstar. They think the sentence is too harsh. But others say the sentence sends a strong message that no one, even a Bollywood superstar, is above the law. Liz Nislas, CNN, New Delhi.
Now to a brawl getting a lot of attention. Star MMA fighter Conor McGregor has been arrested and charged with assault. New York police say McGregor allegedly attacked a bus. There we go, part of the larger group smashing a window. This video, pretty damning, obtained by TMZ, seems to show the backstage brawl. UFC President Dana White says the incident is, quote, the most disgusting thing that has ever happened in the history of the company.
But you want to grab 30 friends and come down here and do what you did today? It's disgusting. And I don't think anybody is going to be, huge Conor McGregor fans after this.
Well, CNN could not reach McGregor's team for comment. He and a second fighter, who was charged, just appeared in court a few minutes ago and walked out here to a crowd and some profanity aimed at them. I'm Robin Kerner. Up next, Marketplace Africa. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Think Zenith. In today's fast-moving, fast-changing world, you need a financial partner that understands your unique expectations. A bank with presence in major financial centers across the world, with the enabling platform to facilitate seamlessly, whenever, wherever, however. A bank with best-in-class financial solutions from a superb combination of technology and human touch for easy, fast, and secure banking that creates real value. Turning dreams into reality is now in your hands. People, technology, service. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
They run with innovation and embrace victory. Tango Tar and Real Madrid. Together as one. Tango Tar, global partner of Real Madrid.
This weekend, go to cnn.com/motorsport for highlights from the Bahrain Grand Prix in association with DHL.
This month on Talk Asia, emotion through the art of movement. Meet the self-described unlikely ballerina taking the world of dance by storm.
This isn't normal to be a young African-American girl and thriving in the ballet world.
See how Misty Copeland is changing perceptions, one stage at a time.
Hi, I'm Misty Copeland. You can watch me this month on Talk Asia here in Hong Kong.
Saturday on CNN. All new African voices. creatives proved that all art is for the masses.
Making art is a gift. For me, I don't want to keep my gift. I want to share it with the people, you know.
African Voices, Sunday on CNN, in association with Glow.
I'm Sam Kiley in Mogadishu, Somalia, and this is CNN.
The Dangote Group stands at the forefront of African enterprise, with substantial investments that will propel the continent towards greater prosperity. Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
Welcome to Marketplace Africa. We cover the biggest economic trends impacting the continent. So last week we showed you how Kenya's fishermen are dealing with declining fish population in Lake Victoria, and also how they're dealing with competition with exported fish from China. Now this week we're going to tell you about another challenge for their industry, and that is the supply chain, or rather the process of getting the fish from the lake to your plate. So the World Economic Forum says that 94% of spoiled food in sub-Saharan Africa is a result of insufficient supply chains. One of the biggest issues for Kenya's fish supply chain is just keeping the fish cold. It certainly sounds like a simple task, but it actually takes a lot of investment and innovation to keep Kenya's fish on ice.
Scraping ice and pouring into buckets. A crucial first step for fishermen in the cold chain process. But in Kenya, some of the links in the system are broken.
The cold chain, the way it works and the way it still works today, is fish are caught on the lake or from local streams and rivers. And those fish are caught by fishermen, kept in a boat, kept in the sun. A day or two later, so now day 2 or 3 for the fish, those fish are collected by an aggregation boat, which will then take it to a central point. The quality of the fish will be degraded by not having been properly preserved by at least 2 days.
Not having a proper cold chain is bad for business.
Obviously, it's a very sensitive product, and we need it here within 24 hours of it being caught. The amount of times it goes wrong in a month, and the amount of wastage we have as a result is huge. And the amount of fish that goes bad or that we don't accept is approximately 25% of the total amount consumed in fish.
Victory Farms, one of Kenya's largest fish farms, made significant investment to establish a more efficient cold chain.
So the cold chain at Victory Farms, we've installed a 5-ton ice machine out on the lake. So already the fish are now in a temperature-safe environment in terms of preservation. We then process those fish. We take the guts out, which extends the shelf life pretty substantially, and we move those fish to Nairobi basically overnight. Now, not all of our fish are sold same day, so we also bring fish into our freezing system, which can preserve the fish, of course, for a longer period of time, but then properly frozen.
Victory Farms plans to invest heavily in improving their cold chain. Small-scale fishermen often lack the capital for sizable long-term investment, but new innovations may offer an alternative.
Before the solar freezers, they were using ice blocks. So somebody would have to travel very far to go pick ice blocks, travel very far back to come back with ice blocks that are not sufficient for the catch, and that is already the progress of melting.
The British firm Solartech manufactures energy-saving products like solar freezers to help small-scale fishermen.
It's not really an efficient cold storage solution, but with the fridge freezers, this means that somebody comes out with a catch, they finish, and it's directly in the freezer. They're paying per kilogram to put it in the fridge, so they're paying 50 shillings for storing 10 kgs of fish, which is about $1 something? Half $1.
But there are many other issues aside from keeping fish cold that needs to be addressed in order for the system to work.
Step 1 is just getting equipment here, which is already a 6-month process, but more difficult than that is powering the units.
Ice needs power, and power is not, let's say, consistent in this part of the world. We're on the grid, but depending on the time of the year, even in good times, we'll maybe have 20% power outages. What that means, obviously, we then have huge challenges in terms of producing ice again.
Roads are also difficult to navigate.
We need a refrigerated unit because there's every chance that truck could be stuck at the side of the road and it might take 24 hours to get there. I would say not uncommon for for the truck to be stuck at the side of the road. And then you've got to send a crew of guys to help dig it out, or you've got to source a tractor or a piece of heavy machinery to pull the truck clear.
Many businesses and fishermen hope government initiatives can help power and road infrastructures and enable a cold chain system. In the meantime, they are taking it upon themselves to find solutions. Farai Sebenzo, CNN, Nairobi.
All right, time for a quick break here on Marketplace Africa. When we come back, we're going to actually stay in Kenya, and I'll introduce you to the man who turned a company on the brink of closure into one of the country's most profitable banks. Don't go away.
Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
Making every journey personal. Singapore Airlines, a great way to fly.
This is CNN. The Dangote Group stands at the forefront of African enterprise. Since 1978, we've touched the lives of millions of people by meeting their basic needs. Our belief in the promise of Africa has taken us into 14 African countries. With substantial investments that will propel the continent towards greater prosperity, promising jobs, improved standards of living, and economic growth. Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
The Profit Point, in association with Dangote.
Welcome back, everybody. Equity Bank is Kenya's biggest bank by market value. It started off as a struggling mortgage provider that serviced mostly low-income customers. The new direction turned the company towards profitability.
Equity Bank started as a Kenyan story, but it's now an African story. The essence of equity is to be a catalyst of socio-economic transformation of the continent. I'm Dr. James Mwangi, the Group Managing Director and Chief Executive of Equity Group Holdings. This was the whole back office. That's where Equity Bank started. I was privileged in the early 90s to be given an opportunity to be a turnaround manager for Equity Building Society and was condemned for corruption. It had been started with a capital base of 1 million shillings, but had accumulated losses of 33 million shillings. Within 2 years, we were able to turn around the bank, and I was recruited to be the Strategy, Finance and Operations Director. So the first thing we asked our staff was whether they would accept 25% of their salaries to be paid in terms of shares, because we were still struggling to pay their salaries. Today, looking back, is one of the best decisions, because those who held to those shares, the shares are today worth much, much more, and have made them fairly significantly wealthy people in society. The second aspect was in 1997, we started to ask customers to convert some of their savings into investment shares. And again, that has become maybe the biggest pressing to our customer base, involving and engaging them in the turnaround of the building society. Today we are very privileged to have our first customer, account number 1. By 2002, we got Africa, the first microfinance specialized fund, which was set in Senegal to invest in the building society. They gave us $1.6 million for 16% of the shareholding of the building society. And that gave us a huge capital injection that allowed us to grow for the next 3 years. In 2004, we did a private placement and asked our customers to invest. And that year, we raised $10 million. And that enabled us now to be really well prepared. So in 2004, the last day of the year, we converted Equity Building Society to Equity Bank, and we became a fully regulated banking institution. By 2007, we made our first $1 billion in profit. We decided to list Equity Bank in the Nairobi Stock Exchange, and when we rang the bell, the market turned out that we had a market value of 4.7 billion shillings. With the listing in the stock exchange, we were able to discover the true value, and that enabled us to really seek international capital to support our growth. So in 2008, with this newfound capital base, we started regional expansion. And that, for the first time, saw us go to Uganda, followed by South Sudan, Rwanda, Tanzania, and in 2014 to DRC Congo. The customer base has moved from 27,000 customers to 12.1 million customers. The number of staff have moved from 27 to 9,000 members of staff. And looking back, last year, we made 24 billion shillings. So it has been an incremental journey. I'm really excited that I could meet the next generation. The biggest future plans of Equity is to use its brand to grow and leverage on foundations and multilateral organizations that want to impact Africa. By providing them with the foundation platform and the infrastructure of Equity, the corporate fund. Equity, because of its brand and because of its resource capability, has a unique opportunity to provide direction and leadership to see that transformation of Africa happens during our lifetime.
Although Equity Bank is now in 6 African countries, Kenya still makes up to 80% of the business. Mwangi says he's planning a new wave of regional expansion to change that. That does it us here on Marketplace Africa. Remember, you can always see past stories on our website, and of course, keep up with us on Facebook as well. I'm Zain Asher. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time in the Marketplace.
The Profit Point, in association with Dangote.
You are watching an auction of human beings. There are 12 Nigerians that were sold in front of us. They come in their thousands.
We're now in Tripoli. There are 1 to 2 of these auctions every month.
We live in such a fast-paced world where the news has been so relentless. Historic events have happened one after the other. I think that you need that daily appointment with viewers around the world to try and sort through the news of the day. What's important? Why does it matter to me? How do I put it all in context? We follow the news as it happens and where it happens. And then we also take a step back to walk the viewer through the day's news. That is the mission of Halagarani tonight.
A region steeped in history and blessed with untold archaeological riches, now reconnecting with its past and revealing new treasures to the world. This month, join Becky Anderson as we get exclusive access to the sites and the people, bringing Saudi Arabia's ancient past to life.
I feel that's part of my history.
Inside the Middle East, Sunday on CNN, in association with MISC.
Growing a brand is a different time in life, you know, and it's not, Formula 1 will one day stop. When I do stop, what is there beyond? And the only thing I have beyond is my brand. You know, and there's other things obviously I'm into, but the weight of what I help hopefully build whilst I'm in Formula 1 will carry me a certain distance afterwards and open doors or help things elevate afterwards. And I don't want to stop and not have something else great to move on to, something else that's challenging. And so that's really what it's about building. I love acting. I don't know if I'm actually any good at it. I love music. And kids are really the deep-rooted heart for me. So I think kids are the future, so I want to do something with kids. When I'm at the pearly gates one day, I want to be able to say that I helped these guys, or I encouraged these guys to do something, or I was a part of something that helped the world. You know, it's cool to be able to give something back.
I'm George Howell. This is CNN.
Welcome to CNN Talk. We're talking plastic, very hard to live without, but undoubtedly doing a great amount of damage to the world. So we're asking you today, can we get away from our addiction to plastic?
From coffee cups to water bottles, some 8 million tons of plastic trash leak into the ocean each year.
You use it for a minute or two, but it joins the waterways, takes decades to break down, maybe longer. Much of it joins the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Compounding the problem, it takes longer to degrade in the ocean than on land.
This plastic breaks down over time, and marine mammals ingest it. They eat it. And they can die from it.
All that plastic that's inside this bird.
Right now, you will go into your supermarket. You have no choice but to take home that shed load of plastic that you don't want.
We're treating them as if they're a disposable commodity, and actually they're not.
We have to fear plastic for not only what it does to the marine environment, but what it's doing to us.
Can we ever break our addiction to plastic? Have your say. Facebook.com/CNNI. We're going to show you some quite shocking images during the show. Also some shocking statistics. Just starting with this. Plastic facts. Enough plastic is thrown away each year to circle the globe 4 times. 50% of plastic is used once and thrown away. 500 billion plastic bags are used worldwide. And Aisha, it takes 500 years for this product to disintegrate completely.
Completely, and I think that's something that we all need to be educated about, and it's quite a shock because we live in this very throwaway kind of culture. You know, those pictures, if anyone's ever been to sort of a music festival, I think you just see these sort of piles of kind of plastic bottles piling up, and we just have this, everything is convenience. You know, our popular culture, our lives are based on convenience. How easy is it? How quick? You know, for you as a consumer, just as least hassle as possible. But we are starting to learn that that does have a cost. It has an opportunity cost for the planet. And there's been some very interesting research which has come out from the British government, who I have to say have really taken some leadership on this issue. Liam said before on the Facebook segment they've introduced a tax on plastic bags, and that has significantly reduced the consumption because it's a good nudge behaviour policy. But they did a report recently which said that the plastic littering in the world's oceans is expected to triple within a decade. And along with that and rising sea temperatures and chemical pollutions, we've got a serious threat to our sort of marine wildlife. And also, we're starting to, a lot of people would argue it's too late, but we're suddenly as a society realising that when you just throw something away, it has to go somewhere. Yeah. It just doesn't disappear into the ether.
Let's take you then, on that note, to Midway. It's in the middle of the Pacific. Nick Payne-Walsh went there to see where this plastic ends up, and he walked along the shoreline. Let's just show you what it looks like as Nick went there.
The tide has left a line of trash all along the beach here, pretty much as far as your eye can see. And it's amazing in the kind of detail, too, of the things you find.
Like a plastic mannequin's head. And if it rained in a city far away from here for a few minutes, maybe somebody bought themselves a plastic umbrella for a quarter of an hour.
Just remember, none of this was used or brought here. It floated here for thousands of miles over months. We're 1,300 miles from the nearest city.
Lots of comments coming in. Rosemary saying, can we put a stop to its production? Is it possible? Use recyclable materials. Farhat saying, we will have to do something for sure to save and protect our environment. I think everyone's agreed on that. It's just whether or not we can change our habits.
That's right. It's interesting that our colleague Nick Pant-Walsh was there. It's between Hawaii and California, very much that part of the world, that the biggest mass of plastic in the ocean is to be found. The way currents and tides work, all plastic in the ocean tends to coagulate around 5 areas. And the biggest mass of plastic, it's millions and millions of tons, hundreds and hundreds of square miles, is between California and Hawaii. A Dutch team recently went out there and did some research. They found the highest concentration of plastic in the ocean ever recorded. And they took some of the plastic, and it's got dates on it. Some of the pieces could be identified going back to the early 70s. What a stark reminder that this stuff doesn't biodegrade. So to your question, Max, we do have to start using more materials that do degrade. Plastic plant pots, you can use pulp plant pots, believe it or not. You can use more glass. We need to find alternatives. And I think the BBC series Blue Planet, which rightly went around the world, this is something that Britain's very, very good at. Some of the images there, the image of the poor sea turtle with a straw stuck in its nose, absolutely heartbreaking. It'd make you weep to look at it. It really has raised consciousness.
Well, Nick had a similar experience. He found a dead bird on the beach, and this is what he found inside it.
It's still home to the old US airstrips used to attack the Japanese in World War II. But it's also now a new front line in the struggle to learn what plastic is doing to the food we eat. Here we see how plastic has gotten into a species.
How long ago did that die?
Not very long ago.
Matt cuts open a bird, dead for only a matter of days.
So, as you open it up, you can see
that's incredible.
All that plastic that's inside this bird.
The same colours that distinguish this brand make it appeal to birds as food too. It's the colour of squid.
It brings it home, doesn't it, Ian?
It really does. We live in a throwaway society. But the good thing is that there are choices to be made here, and this problem is solvable. It's partly about individual action. I think there does need to be, I think you're right, public education campaigns on this. But governments can play a role here too. And we've seen through the plastic bag levy in this country, we've seen Rwanda back in about 2005 banned plastic bags altogether, because if you went to Kigali, and they were just blowing around all over the place. You go to Kigali now, you don't see a plastic bag on the streets anywhere at all. In America, most supermarkets use big paper bags instead of plastic bags. In this country, you have to pay 5 pence for a plastic bag in a supermarket, so they don't automatically dish them out to you as they used to. In Germany, instead of all of the Fanta and Coke being in plastic bottles, they tend to be in glass bottles, and there's a deposit on them, so there's an incentive on the consumer to return them. So there are things that can be done. You're never going to get rid of plastic, but you can at least mitigate its consumption.
Shariati on Facebook saying this isn't an addiction, it's thoughtlessness. Do people just not care?
I think they just don't think about it. I think it's just so, because we're all so busy, and particularly in Western cultures, there is a convenience premium on everything. So, for example, some of the things we should be doing is, we should be carrying water bottles around that, we can refill, and there should be a good public policy thing might be to have more sort of water fountains around, so you could
which are being introduced in London.
Yeah, which you could fill up your bottles. And I think for a lot of the coffee shops, they should really be incentivising people to bring in their own plastic cups and maybe get a little discount. My friend actually went in with a coffee cup and just a reusable one, and they weren't very accommodating. She asked if they could just wash it out before they put the coffee in, and they said no. So I think that it would be helpful for the big coffee retailers. I think it's got to be a partnership approach. I think you have to have consumer education, consumer choice and activity, and you have to have businesses getting on board as well.
That's key, the business thing. So here in this country, we've got a very famous retail brand, Selfridges. It's a bit like Macy's in New York. Selfridges got flagship stores in various UK cities. They're now saying that they won't put pop, if you like, fizzy drinks into plastic bottles.
Let's just look at this statement, and I'll let you carry on, because we got this statement from them. Selfridges and its partners now want to inspire change across the wider sector by encouraging companies to help solve the issue by removing all single-use plastic carbonated drinks from their offices and retail outlets in order to encourage the end
of throwaway plastic. The Queen is doing the same in her households as well. They're not going to make a big impact on their own. But you feel as
But you know, Selfridges is absolutely a high-end store. It's an aspirational store. It's where people love to shop, and now we've given them lots of free advertising. They're sort of getting ahead of this, and others will follow. And here we have the three of us. We often have very different political views, and we completely agree. But, you know, big food is a very powerful interest group. You know, big beverage is a very powerful interest group, if you like. You have some of the most iconic brands in the world connected to fizzy drinks, to juices, and all the rest of it. You know, we've seen across the Western world an absolute explosion in the power of coffee shops. You know, certainly in Anglo-Saxon countries and in continental Europe too. If they don't get on board, they have a lot to lose here.
But it goes.
They have a lot. There's going to be a lot of stick as well as just
deeper than that, because if you go around your local supermarket, you'll find all sorts of products that have huge amounts of packaging on them, sometimes 3 or 4 layers. And the reason is not to keep the food fresh, the reason is to make them look more attractive so people buy more of them. Now, I don't know how you encourage supermarkets to do that without actually forcing them to.
Well, there was a famous example where they wrapped coconuts in plastic. Like, the whole point of a coconut, it's got its own protective shell around it. You don't need to swathe it in plastic.
Hassan's saying reduce the obsession with disposable materials. We are obsessed, aren't we? We're obsessed with the packaging and the presentation of these items.
Well,
but how do you solve that as an emotional need?
I don't know if consumers are actually obsessed about it. I think they'll sort of take what they're given.
But it must work, otherwise they wouldn't spend the money on it, surely.
Well, I think it's more I think that's sort of more from the brand side of things, because I don't think anybody, if all supermarkets suddenly said, right, we're going to put our fruit in paper bags, I, as a consumer, I don't care about
and
that.
You look at all these fresh soups that people love to buy in this country now, they're all in plastic containers. If they were in glass containers, would anybody mind?
I don't think anybody would mind at all.
That might be an issue with freshness. What about this as a solution on the front of the Telegraph? Pay 22p charge for a plastic bottle. The idea is you get it back if you
That's
recycle
much more. For international viewers, we pay 5p on a plastic bag, which is about 8 US cents. So 22p. A plastic bottle, you know, a bottle of fizzy drink, maybe say £1.50 or £2. So that's about 10% up, you know, above 10% charge. That's quite a lot. That would have a big impact. But then a lot of people would say, yes, but it's often less well-off people who, you know, it's like when we talk about putting massive taxation on cigarettes. There's often less well-off people.
It will also encourage the manufacturers not to use plastic, because the sugar tax comes into force today in the UK, and that's already encouraged these carbonated drink manufacturers to reduce the sugar content, so consumers don't have to pay the tax on the bottle. So I think the role of government sometimes is to enforce. To use the word that Aisha used a moment ago, it is also sometimes to nudge.
I think you do get that money back if you recycle it. I think that's the principle, isn't it? But a lot of people won't, presumably.
They won't, again, exactly, I think they have to, again, exactly, we were just actually talking beforehand, when I was growing up in Scotland, they used to have a bottle recycling scheme, and actually as kids, you would, that was
make money.
Yeah, exactly, it was like a way of getting a bit of pocket money, you would go and sort of take the bottles back. So I think you've got to try these things. I think with so much, you know, when the 5p on the plastic bags, a lot of people said, oh no, I don't think this is going to affect, and it has had a huge, it's been a fantastic
It's not just a
policy.
5p. You're at the supermarket and the person at checkout says, do you want a plastic bag? It's almost a shame to say, yes, I do.
On the
no, of course I don't. I'm a nice person.
You feel a bit dirty.
Can I confess something though? I always forget mine. I have about 143 bags for life in my kitchen. So I just like, don't even go there. I mean, exactly.
Just Theo's pointing out on this bottle deposit.
All right, Liam.
Well, plenty of plastic bottles in Germany still, but the deposit payable on them has decreased the number thrown into the environment dramatically.
It's called a pfand.
A what?
A pfand. P-F-A-N-D. It's a deposit in German.
Okay.
I speak a lingo.
Yeah, you are a resident.
Oh, Italian as well.
I was going to say, that sounded like a dodgy.
Multi-talented.
Fally is saying, why do we always talk about fixing problems when it's already too late? Well, it's never too late.
Well, if you think it's too late, let's just give up on the whole of mankind. What a ridiculous comment.
I will let Ian take us into the break with that.
All new Inside Africa. Unlocking the mysteries behind a continent you thought you knew. and rescue from Mozambique.
I just think Pep wanted to rescue them, really, and he'd think about what he was going to do with them afterward, but they've certainly served as the means.
Inside Africa, Saturday, only on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank.
I've been to in the Middle East aren't those you can walk or drive to. They are in the eyes of the first Arab woman fighter pilot breaking down barriers at supersonic speed, in the smile of a young UAE student determined to shed stereotypes and make her way in the world. These are places you'll find hope, joy and inspiration.
On the next Living Golf, we preview the Masters by celebrating the players from Spain who've left a mark on Augusta National. We reflect on Sergio Garcia's incredible win in 2017.
I was like, I'm in a good shot here, and he's in another good shot, and he's making birdie, and I'm making birdie, and I'm making eagle, and he's making birdie. It was great fun to be a part of.
And we remember two-time Masters champion, the late, great Seve Ballesteros, with his son, Javier. Living Golf, Saturday on CNN partnership with Rolex.
America first.
CNN has the man to cut through all of this noise.
Black Wolf Blitzer in Washington.
Wolf, weeknights on CNN.
Welcome back to CNN Talk. We're talking about the amount of plastic in the world. Joshua on Facebook saying, show statistics of our plastic waste so people are more informed. Here we are. Some statistics for you. 8 million metric tons of plastic each year. 5 trillion pieces of plastic are in our oceans. Plastic toxins end up in fish. And then on our plates, plastics kill 1 million seabirds, 100,000 marine mammals. Let's show you some really shocking images of a whale and the autopsy that followed. There's the whale. I think it was beached. This is Norway. When they cut it open, you'll see what they find inside. But this comes down to the plastic bag issue, and I think this is one of the sort of stories that really shocked the UK, which is why they brought in that sort of cost to plastic bags in supermarkets, which has made a huge difference. So when you see those sorts of images, it does bring it home. And maybe people, Aisha, just need to be more informed, because perhaps they just don't know.
Yeah, I think people absolutely need to be, the point needs to be hammered home that when you throw this stuff away, it just doesn't disappear. We just have this image in our head that we have this throwaway culture, we put it in a bin and that is the end of it. People need to be educated, just in the same way that people are starting to educate people more about meat and, food and the food process. Just because you have a nice steak on your plate doesn't arrive there by magic. There's a sort of process. But I also think one of the things that's just really important on businesses is where can you use public policy as a lever? So, I mean, I was just thinking about what we were talking about, the coffee thing. I mean, these coffee houses are everywhere. Like, they're complete. I mean, it's now part of everyone's daily routine to nip in and get a couple of coffees a day. Either they have to really come up with something, or a while ago, a select committee in the House of Commons proposed the idea of a latte tax, where again you significantly put a premium on it, so you eventually hit a price point where you start to sort of change people's behaviour. And I think the other thing that people need to be educated about is all of these plastics. The research is showing that it is affecting or having the potential to affect our health now as well, because a lot of the fish that we're consuming will have these trace elements of plastics in them as well, and that could actually be very damaging to our health.
These are microplastic presents in tap water.
Yeah.
So when it really breaks up into tiny little parts, doesn't it? So in the US, it's at 94%, and you can see some countries, Lebanon, 94%.
Yeah.
We're drinking plastic, and people aren't aware of it, so they can't see it.
Absolutely, it's a huge could become a health pandemic, really. And it's not just the images that we see of animals suffering which move people. It's also hard data like that. And for Joshua, I've got a little bit more data here. So 400 million tons of plastic is produced around the world each year, and 40% of it is single-use plastic. Quite astonishing. But there is some hope. a UK government agency brought out some research just in the last couple of days suggesting that the UK is now using 9 billion fewer plastic bags since the 5p levy was brought in just a few years ago. And there are now signs, we have trawlings of the waters around the British Isles, obviously quite a populous area, and there are definite signs now that the number of plastic bags has fallen, maybe by up to a half in some areas. And that's new UK government research that's just come out, which should really inspire and motivate people elsewhere in the world. This can be done. Obviously, our house is no way completely in order, but a change was made. There was a lot of doubt about it. It's now almost universally accepted. The supermarkets complained, and now they're not complaining anymore. It was a bold move, and it came off.
Well, and these beads have been banned as well. I mean, if you look at a lot of your toothpaste, and it will have little plastic beads in them, which, I mean, I don't know why they're in there, whether they have any effect or not, but they've been banned now, and I think that was a major problem for sea life as well.
But to quote a thing, I mean, these things are good, but in terms of the global problem, they are a drop in the ocean. And the bigger question is, how do you get governments and countries and consumers all across the world to reduce their plastic? You know, I think for us, as pretty affluent, middle-class, sort of woke people on this issue, we're going to really think about our behaviour now. But what about people, you know, in developing countries where you can't often get, like, fresh, clean water? You do have to get it in a plastic bottle or something. What are the bigger kind of, you know, global solutions that we should be looking at?
Ty is saying scientists should look for a better way to dispose of plastic waste, but here's an environmental campaigner with a solution saying there are lots out there. We don't have to use plastic.
Paper, card, wood pulp, grass, glass, tin, not plastic lined, aluminium. You know, there's so many other materials. There won't be one thing that directly replaces plastic. It'll be a plethora of things, many different things.
Let's speak to our resident economist. Why aren't the businesses going for it then?
Well, necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it? And there's clearly a huge issue here to be solved. If somebody in a lab somewhere, I mean, Sean Sutherland talked about, you know, paper and pulp and glass, and some of the pulp containers that you get these days are excellent. You can drink hot coffee out of them, and they're completely fine. A lot of the plants I buy for my garden now are in pulp pots rather than in plastic pots, and our own National Trust here in the UK is about to start banning the use of plastic pots. But, you know, the invention of plastic is quite, you know, it's within the last century. It's been used as a mass market product. It completely changed packaging around the world, but it was invented, and maybe something else will now be invented that has all the good characteristics of plastics. It's flexible, it's light, it's cheap, it can be moulded very, very easily, but is biodegradable.
But there are so many different products that we just take for granted. You look at coat hangers, for example, just to name one. You can have wooden coat hangers, you can have metal coat hangers, you can also have plastic ones. Well, I don't know what the relative cost is of plastic and wood and metal, but again, that's something that people can look at. There are hundreds of other products that if you want to get out of plastic, you can do.
In terms of the sort of comments, a lot of them are talking about people being selfish. You know, this is one more. People are selfish. Give them a benefit to recycle. They're not necessarily going to act on it on their own volition, so they don't feel strongly enough about it.
I think that's absolutely right. We are inherently, it's kind of human frailty to be selfish. And, you know, as I said earlier, you know, we are very much driven by convenience as well. And very successful products are often driven by, you know, we want things easily, quickly. We're all busy. We don't want to have to be doing extra chores or going out of our way to do things. So I think that's why you have to have like a number of approaches. You have to have a lot of public education. You have to try, and that's why Liam's right. Stuff like Blue Planet or the pictures, the very emotive pictures you show of sea life and wildlife, and also people being slightly selfish. We don't want to go on our lovely holiday, you know, somewhere where we're trying to swim in the sea and, you know, see all the nice fish, and then suddenly you just have a massive plastic bag kind of swimming
the mannequin's head.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, there's a sort of a selfish thing, but also I think you have to get businesses to do their bit so they